Hello and welcome to the Google Semantic Search Community Hangout on Air. Our guest today is Peter Hatherley, and he's got some exciting news to share with us. And essentially today it's a very chatty thing on how to look at semantic technologies, the impact they have, and how we actually go about fashioning one. What is the thinking behind it? What is the logic? What is the process that creates one? And then how does that affect us on a daily basis if we are part of it, or how does that as a product begin to integrate itself in the workplace? So without further ado, I'm going to let Peter introduce himself a little bit and tell us a little bit about what he's done and the process, and then we'll start taking questions, and I will interpose a lot more. We've got Bob with us today as well, and anybody else from the community who wants to come in. There is a link in the community on the pinned post which you can just click on and just join in. It'll be amazing, really cool to actually see you. All right, so Peter, please feel free to come in here. Great to see you here.
Really great to catch up again, and thanks for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. And we're getting a bit of feedback.
Yeah, somebody has got it turned on. So if you just, if you don't have the page turned on, then you won't get that feedback coming through.
Yeah, I've definitely got mine. Also, pretty sure there.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
All right, so Peter, let's start off with, first of all, tell us a little bit about the CISC. What is it exactly?
Well, SICE, I call it SICE.
Okay.
It's a conceptual intelligence, and the main thing with it is that it's getting quite difficult to listen with the feedback. I hope others can hear me.
I can hear you clearly, but there is a feedback there. So let's see if we can actually just mute you a little bit. Okay. Okay, yeah. Go on.
Okay.
There you go.
So yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, look. Yeah, SICE is a very interesting product. I mean, I must have gone through about 100 names, looking at names to name it, because it's got such a wide range of what it can do. Really, and you've seen the authoring product, so you know what the authoring product's like. But SICE,
well, let's for the audience's sake, a little bit. Let's explain. I mean, essentially, what do semantic technologies do in general? If we explain the concept, because people understand semantics as far as linguistics are concerned. They understand semantics in terms of the conceptual links and relationship mining that goes on and the value that arises from those connections. But when we start talking about an engine in itself and a product that does something very specific, and semantic technologies, they're not very sure about it. So if we explain the broader picture first.
Yeah, well, to me, there's a great difference between, say, schema or what I term analytical semantics. So there's analytical semantics, which gives you your schema and your various things, which is very structural. What I'm discussing here is on-page semantics. So really, in a way, it's a new product because, or a new area, because on-page semantics has been difficult to date. Most people have been using, say, thesauruses or other forms of research to dig into various things. So they're actually, and people have progressed quite well in that area. I can see that.
Essentially, I mean, again, for the audience's sake, when you say on-page semantics, you're talking about web pages across the web, basically. Okay. And how we create semantic value within them when we create content in effect.
That's right.
So if we talk about the conceptual intelligence semantic search engine, how did it arise as a project to begin with? What was the impetus for that?
Well, it came very strangely, and to be honest, I was studying. I've always been a great studier of language and looking at various things, and I was looking at ancient language, and I saw a pattern in ancient language that got me thinking, and it was really sort of an epiphany of sorts. And but that was only the beginning. It was that was like the baby steps of it, and sometimes you could have a look at the sets and you might actually see those baby steps. But there's a lot more to it, and there was a lot more to the matrix as you went deeper down the rabbit hole as such. But it was really sort of amazing, because everywhere I looked and everywhere I looked for this pattern, I saw it. And so originally it was just a really interesting experience of learning and just going through, looking at words and putting them together. And I had a lot of friends and family that sort of bought into the idea as well. So
You make it sound very easy, actually, when you explain it like that. And you think, oh, that seems so easy. And obviously it's not. It's hugely technical, and it takes a lot of actual engineering ingenuity to actually put it together. So what were the main obstacles you encountered as you tried to go from the idea to the actual concrete concept?
Well, I sort of got stuck in the semantic thesaurus stage. I was trying to make a semantic thesaurus, and then we had the earthquakes here, and then that gave me a bit of space, because the web work wasn't there wasn't as much of it, even though my positioning hadn't changed. It dropped by about 40%, which was quite huge. But it gave me space to really sort of think about it and sit back and think, what will I do? And what I came to the conclusion of was that it had to be a search engine of sorts. And but 50 algorithms later, here we are. I mean, it has taken 50 algorithms, and it's slowly got.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the moment you mention 50 algorithms, and these are not like tiny incremental leaps, right? Every time it's almost a new form of it, which builds on what was there before. So, what the starting point, which was the thesaurus, morphed fairly quickly, didn't it?
Yes, and I saw the limitations because it was too flat. It was like a flat database. The algorithm is actually is picking up these things. So you've got to remember that it's an algorithm that's actually creating these lists. It's not a flat database like a thesaurus. Like if you type in a thesaurus, they're using a flat database and they've got links to that database. With this, it's actually picking it up by the language patterns. And that's what makes it very similar to Google. Because I posted a post about, I think it was Aaron Bradley had posted it, and it was a job spec for Google, and it was a really interesting insight, and it shows that the patterns that I've been looking at, and they'll be looking at the patterns, they'll be analysing the patterns. I was analysing the patterns for 12 years, so I know what's involved, and it's a job I could have applied for. In that sense, not that I will, but that's the reality of it. So
I think I'm going to interrupt you here, because actually you're making a very important point. And I mean, the moment we start talking about semantic technology of any kind, there are two things that actually make it work. And I'm expounding here for everybody just so they can lay the framework for people to understand a lot of the things which you're doing and a lot of the difficulties which you face. And the things which actually makes a semantic technology work are data and then patterns. And specifically the patterns created by the data itself and the interaction of different data points. So looking at that, if we think about the massive amount of data that is required to actually look at this, and then the ingenuity, or rather the kind of thinking required to begin a pattern recognition process, you begin to see the difficulty of the task that actually lies ahead. And what's important here is that whether you're Google or whether you're somebody working from home at the other end of the scale, let's say, you're pretty much looking at the same massive vista. And you're trying to make sense of all that from a different angle, perhaps, but the problems which you face are pretty much the same. So this is the playground that actually Peter is playing in.
Yeah, and there's a slight difference in the way that Google's doing it. They are using big data to do it. I'm actually using what people would consider small data. But when you say small data, it's still 50,000, 60,000 words.
Pretty big, yes. We must say that, yeah.
That's right. But it's had a lot longer. Google's been collecting this data for how long? I mean, 10 years, probably about 12 years.
It's just over. I mean, Google is just over 15 years old. I mean, they had a 15th birthday last year. So we're going towards 16. And let's not forget that they're not using a single point of collection, right? They're using a massive, they've got a multi sort of faceted presence across the web, across every device, across the Android environment, search, and all their properties. So it's quite a big net.
Yeah. the thing with language is that it has this interconnectedness and the semantics that you've been talking about. And understanding semantics, I think, is half the problem. People don't really sort of grasp what semantics are. And I put out a good example of this is I put out a playlist of music last week, and what it was there, I put it there basically to show how people see things. Like the semantic is taking in the whole picture in my view. It's the inclusivity of everything. It's taking in the good, the bad, the warts, everything. You've got to get everything in. And when I looked through Spotify and did a search on River of Life, the variations in what people considered River of Life actually shows you the secret behind semantics. What the secret is behind semantics is you bring your own personal profile to it. You know, Google's got a profile, but it's a lot smaller than the profile you've got on yourself. So when you bring your perspective to the table, then you look at the various patterns that are there, you'll see it differently than I'll see it. And say, for instance, it was about martial arts. Your contextual memory will be completely different than mine. So this is the beauty of it. People think, oh, well, you know, it's a list and you're going to be doing keyword something. Sorry, no, it's not like that at all. And you know yourself, relevancy is far more important than ranking. To me, the SEO side of it was just a side effect. I was actually doing it from a creative point of view. I was trying to write more engaging stuff and bring more value into it. And for some reason, I had a blind spot on the fact of SEO, even though I've been in SEO since 1996. But for some reason, you know.
I think that's amazing, right? Because you actually took a problem, turned it on its head, tackled it the other way, and started coming up with a real solution, which is applicable to so many people. And I think that in itself is fascinating, because you're quite right. Like, I mean, you've been experienced in SEO for a long time, and I see this on a daily basis, and I think we all struggle to some extent with that. The more we know, the more tradition-bound we become. So the next level, although it should be the next level we're at, is actually sometimes a leap too far. Somebody has to show us or make us do it. Or those who actually do it, like yourself, are absolutely amazing, because it's an epiphany.
Yeah, and especially if it works, people are stuck in the old SEO. I mean, I still use the old SEO. I mean, you're foolish if you don't. You've got to just dot the I's. Best practice SEO is something that you should have a look at, dot the I's, cross the T's. But what I found about getting in touch with the semantic, and I call the result the semantic. So the query is like the seed, and the result is like the tree and the fruit and whatever comes on it. And so you then pick those ones out and you create concepts. Well, you've had experience in doing it, so you know basically how it works. So it really is easy to pick out concepts, but what I find is everybody does it to their own semantic, and everybody does it according to their own knowledge. So you've got to teach them basically that there is creativity in this, and you will be. To me, it's like a mirror. You will mirror what you think through this, and that's how it works for me.
And doesn't in some way your own personality and I dare say belief structure actually comes through, right? Because that's what actually guides it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it started off like, well, okay, this is interesting. But every corner I turned and everywhere I looked, it was there. And it was sort of like you discovered a matrix behind language. And so it was just exciting the whole way. The good thing about it, and the thing I like about it most, is most comedians use word splits and things like that. And I'm laughing half the day. And I just love to get a physiological test to find out if that's doing me much good. Because, you know, it does make you feel good. And it probably does make you more healthy.
Yes.
And laughter is just great. And, you know, that's why I've got involved in the humorous side of G+, particularly. And that extends my personality into G+, which I like. You know, I found, you know, really a special part of it. Yeah. So.
Cool. That's really cool. Okay, let me ask you a couple of non-technical questions now, because essentially you've gone from, you know, it's quite a journey, right? You started out with something which is, in retrospect, fairly basic. At the time it wasn't. And then it morphed and morphed and morphed. And every time you morphed, your horizons broadened, and you came out with something which is essentially a semantic analysis tool. And now you've got a finished product.
Yes.
So what are the technical steps in terms of, or the practical steps that take, the idea, the dream, to something which, comes in a box, let's say?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question, and because it started off with the algorithm, we just had scripts that just, were at a prompt, and you typed it in, and you got a list, and we just had to, and we put it out to text files and stuff like that. So
Yep.
it was very sort of, very sort of minimal at the start, and so I developed the app quite independently, so because we started selling the semantic
What sort of
sets.
programming languages did you use for that?
I used Perl. Yeah.
Okay.
Perl is the major one that we use. And it's a very good language for this particular purpose. Very good.
Yep.
Yeah. So regex is basically the concept and how we use it, and that works. It works really well. You can do it in PHP. We have got PHP versions that we tried. Perl is by far we get it. We can try with PHP. We're always trying to emulate what Perl did. So, and it's an old language in terms of the internet, but it's a very good one.
Yeah, it's been around a while. I was going to say, but still, I mean that shows there are a lot of libraries which can be accessed on top of that, which makes part of the programming a little bit easier, and especially when it comes to debugging things. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay,
Yeah.
and what's the process? I mean, if you draw a broad picture, obviously, for us,
Yeah.
how do you get from that idea to the box?
Yeah, it starts with the algorithm, and what I did after that was I started developing an interface, and I'm an interface developer. It's one of my strengths, and so I spent a lot of time in that and got it developed. They're basically being developed by two different people. In a way, that was for security, to be honest. So we had one person here locally helping me. The guy that I ran into is just a fanatic for words as well, loves words. His name's Mark Aitchison. He's has been tremendous in this project, and so we worked together over the last, it's about 4 or 5 years on this.
Right.
And
okay.
It just was serendipitous. We happened to run into each other. Actually, he rang me to offer me some web work, and that's actually how it happened. And then I started discussing it with him, and so then we ended up doing this. So, and then the other part of the app, I basically developed. I ran that whole part of it myself and developed it. And then in the end, we handshook it together. So, and that's only happened in the last wee while, because it took me a long time to think, am I going to give this out as a search engine? I came to the conclusion, I was selling these sets for about $300 to the beta testers here in Christchurch, and the top agencies in Christchurch. That was tricky. I mean, I got this idea, go and sell it to my competitors, and I thought, am I going to lose my advantage? You can imagine the thoughts that went through my head.
Yes, which is isn't that a very traditional way of thinking? I think that's brilliant, because you actually, it goes to show, and obviously, because of your experience and journey before that, you're not new to any of it. So you did actually go through the process of thinking about and eliminating a lot of the traditional thoughts, right?
Yes, definitely. And but that was radical, and in a way, it was the seed thought for G+, because when I came to G+, I found the same thing was happening here. And I think collaboration and the way that G+ works has helped me finalise the product, especially, your support and getting involved in the beta testing. Amon Johns, who was just superb. I mean, he was
I've been excited seeing you do this. It's been really fascinating.
Yeah. And so, and there are others that have been involved and given me really great advice. Peter Lund's another one that I shared it with, and he gave me some interesting advice. You've got to, I think it's interesting to have different types of people doing it. I had copywriters that I was testing it with, I had graphic artists, people with completely different mindsets, just so I could see how they used it and, how I could develop from there. And, your advice was highly useful. And Amon really challenged me to make it proof of concept, because yes, I was producing the sets, but as he said, I could have, he said you could have put it together. He knew I wasn't, but he said you could have put it together yourself, and it just challenged me. And I think I'm the sort of person.
That, right?
Yeah. I mean, I I'd rather get a cynic or a critic than a flatterer, because flatterers won't gain anything from it. Whereas if you get someone who genuinely tells you, hey, this is what it needs to be, I take it quite seriously. Yeah. That's
And
just the
isn't
way
that
I think.
fascinating? I think a lot of people, I'm not going to say everybody, but the majority of people in G+ are actually interested in getting at the real thing. You know, they wouldn't necessarily flatter or say something is great if they don't think it is. And by the same token, if they think it isn't great, they're actually prepared to put a lot of thinking and effort in showing you why they think that, which I think is always helpful.
Yeah. I think some people are just scared to be upfront sometimes and say, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing this. But I felt that the whole thing was serendipitous, and I just look back and think, how did this all happen? But it seems to have flowed very naturally, and yet, you know, I was tempted to put it out at different times earlier, but yet now is the perfect time because it's actually producing results that I think are, you know, right up there. But we're going to keep on going. I mean, this is not the last algorithm. Mark's actually, I've given him some instructions on what I want to do with a specialist area that sort of is a new idea that I've had in regard to it. Because I started seeing these connections that were far deeper than what appears on the surface.
Okay. Well, let's get back to that. We'll get back to that in a minute. Let's talk about the practical applications, right? So let's say, I mean, you've got the box, you've got the product.
Yeah.
And the question is, well, what will it do for me, right? If I'm your prospect, I come to you and say, Peter, you've got something, I may want it, I'm not sure. So what does it do?
That's the point you made. It's a good one.
Here's the trick. How do you explain that? Yes.
Yeah. What does it do? Hi, Kristen. How are you? Yeah.
Great.
Nice to see you. Yeah.
Nice
to see you face to face.
Always.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. So it was. I think that the thing is that the first job I did gives a very good idea of how it works. I did a job for a plastering company here in Christchurch called Prime Plastering, and I created a manual set out of these concepts, out of my thesaurus, and it was sort of a little bit more work involved.
Okay.
But that site, when I first saw this happen, I mean, I did this site probably three months before Hummingbird was released. And if you do a search for plastering Christchurch,
Hummingbird,
or whatever, you know, long tail, whatever, it's number one basically for everything. And that was the first site that I ever did like that. So, but it was about, when I first indexed it, it was around, you know, it was standard. I was getting sort of standard SEO. You could get up to 8th, 9th, but you needed backlinks, and they didn't have any backlinks. They just moved here from Tauranga, and they had no, you know, their before and after site figure of the site would be an insight in itself. But in saying that, then I saw that it worked because Hummingbird, I will post this. I was going to post it. I discussed it earlier, but it's where about 20 of my sites, when Hummingbird was released, and they progressively went up over about 4 or 5 days because I was tracking them on every day.
Okay.
And they went up to the top positions. Like they went from,
which is amazing, really, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So
I watched them do this.
If you were to ask you the basic layman questions, which is, I suppose, first of all, what kind of business do you think would benefit the most from this?
I think every business can benefit. Because, in a way, it was sort of, the previous product was limited because the people were buying sets. They'd buy sets, and I'd put together sets that were sort of the equivalent of doing about, say, 5 or 10 searches in sites. Now people can do their own searches, and because it's going to be a lot more inexpensive, people will be able to do those searches more regularly. And it was a bit of a straitjacket in a way. Yes, it was going to be good, but you couldn't just do your own search. You thought, well, maybe this word could be good, or this word could be good. The minimum, the minimum package gives you 25 searches a month. The top package gives you about 300 searches a month.
Okay.
So, whereas these people who were working in the test were only getting one set, and they're paying $395 for it. So you can imagine
Yes.
There's quite a
Bit of a
difference.
difference, right? I understand that. Okay, and
Yeah, but I was involved, so I had to.
I suppose the second question would be, great, I'm sold. How difficult is it to use? Because you know these are the questions which, in an entirely different format, I tend to encounter every time I talk to people about semantic search. So
It's a good
they'll
question.
ask you, yeah, how difficult is that to use? Do I need special training? 100 hours on the dashboard. What exactly does it take?
No. It just takes the ability to search and have and just look for options. The way that I've done it is, so yes, you can see about 200 words at once, but you can pick out words one by one and then build concepts from them. So concept building is what builds the actual, rather than you builds relevancy. And so you're building relevancy at the core level of it. So everything you're writing about, if you use these concepts, will be relevant because Google thinks they're relevant in that sense because of what our tracking has done. So, but I don't think people should set out to get ranking. I think people should set out to get relevancy, because if they set out to get relevancy, you know,
I totally love your message, absolutely, and William there is nodding his head essentially. At the moment we start talking about semantics, a lot of things come to the front, right? And we talk about the accuracy of data, the realness of it. We talk about relevancy. We talk about context, and these are all technical things which come together, pulled together by algorithms, they're pulled together by programming, they bring out an eventual outcome, which is the outcome of semantic technologies, whether it is Google Semantic Search or a product like this. But essentially, we're also talking about keeping things very real, right? This is the whole disruptive, groundbreaking concept that suddenly, we're talking about the application of mathematics, and the real world begins to surface on our screens, in the personalities we meet, in the entities we come across the web, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that it frees you from that keyword stuffing mentality that the old SEO brigade have got. And I'm not saying they're wrong. It's still working, actually. I've watched it working, and I know it's still working to a degree. But there's something a lot nicer about getting conversions than being at the top of the engine. And it's, if you can speak human to human, if you're speaking to the people and the information that they want to get, and give them quality information, it's all about quality information in my view.
Yes.
And
which this is exactly the entire sort of exciting element of semantics and semantic search and semantic technology. It suddenly it strips away the complexity of technology, even though the technology is getting denser and more tightly packed, and it allows the human connection, human to human, to actually surface and make the difference, right?
Yeah, it's a huge difference. And for me, it was like taking off the straitjacket that I had to keyword stuff at the top of titles and make sure that I did all those things. I don't actually do that anymore. I actually start with four questions: who, what, where, and why. And if you can answer those questions properly, you'll be doing your clients a service and your customers.
Okay.
It's very important.
I think exactly on that note, Peter, we've got a question on the stream which basically touches pretty much upon what you said. And Clinton Vorstar is asking, relevancy. Do you think a better way to put it would be verifiability, which pretty much touches on exactly those elements which you just listed here?
Well, I totally agree with it, because it's part of that semantic, and it's a very specific part of that semantic, and sometimes it's really good to look at the specifics of these things.
Yes.
And you get a little bit more insight. I think it's sort of like every time you get a little bit more of information about any subject, as I say, my favourite subject is learning, and so if you're continually learning and expanding your semantic, and it's verifiable, as you say, verifiable. It's what Google's doing. It's saying, it's giving you a tick mark. It's saying this is good.
Yep.
I don't.
You do realize, it's like the magician, right? Is revealing how the magic works now. It's absolutely amazing.
And it works, and it really does work. And I've watched it over a long period of time, and okay, it's been done locally in that sense, and it hasn't been expanded internationally. But bided my time and worked it out so it has more of an appeal into an international market. And
Brilliant.
I've taken out the complexity, probably a bit like Steve Jobs. And I mean, you've got to go for that simplicity and make it easy for people. And that's why I actually didn't put the author out first, because then I had to teach people how to use the author. With the search engine, people can know how search engines work.
It's intuitive.
They know how to pick things out and use them. And so that to me was a far better way to do it. Yeah.
So your official launch, you're actually launched now, essentially, haven't you?
Yeah, we've got a package that's going to be available to GSS members, and it's got 20% off. But it's only for GSS members or anyone that's on here today. I'm happy to do it for them as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so really it's just and it's a decent package because it's because they're subscriptions. They tend to be the first package is 3 months, the second package is 6 months, and the third is 12. So, but you get that 20% off that whole period, so it's quite a substantial saving.
It is, and I think that's brilliant, and I'm always grateful when you do things like that. I think the community absolutely loves it. Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute, and I'm going to ask the audience to let you to ask questions of you. But before we get to that stage, one final question from me. Having been through that journey, you've done, gone from the idea to the product, and you've learned a lot in the process. What would you say was the biggest lesson that you actually got?
The biggest lesson I got was how to deal with criticism, and to get here, you've got to have guts and determination, I think, and you've got to be sure what you're doing, but at the same time, I'm happy to take in what other people are saying, and that's been very helpful to me. Yeah.
Peter, that's really awesome. Peter, I'm smiling because I've been through other explanations of the journey from idea to a business or a product, and every time that question comes up, they always come up with something phenomenally technical, which they in retrospect they would do differently. And you came up with something really human, which I think is absolutely fantastic, because at the end of the day, that is really the defining factor of the collaboration economy.
Yeah.
If you can't deal with people, the know-how that you have in the technicality doesn't work.
That's why I want to give people a discount, because everyone that's been involved has helped me, and they've always had something to say. And the thing about G+ is it's just so relevant. I mean, there's very rarely. I mean, there's lots of fun, and Kristen knows all about that. And that's the part I love about it. And that you can come on and relax and just have a bit of fun, or you can do a bit of business and talk about your business and things like that. And in a very informal way, which is what I like.
Awesome. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to unmute everybody, and basically, if anybody has a question, just please leap in. So, does anybody have a question for Peter?
I have more of a comment, David.
Yeah, go on, Sarah.
That is that, Peter, I'm just awed at your persistence. I think so many people on this journey would have stopped somewhere along the way, and you knew you were on the path, and you kept following it, and you kept, you brought out the machetes and cut away the things that were covering the path, and I am just so impressed with your belief and your I don't know the right word, but your belief.
Perseverance, isn't it?
That perseverance, that's it. Thank you, David. So I just compliment you on that, because so many people would have stopped somewhere along the line. That was a very, very, very long process.
Isn't that, can I just sort of, I mean, that's an excellent point you just made, Zara, and I think, isn't that also part of the fact that, you don't really labor alone anymore? You're not working in a sort of mad scientist in the box kind of thing with your invention. You're doing things again and again and again. You actually have contact with real people, and they get invested in the feedback they give you. They get fired up at what you're doing, and suddenly you feel that you can't let it go because it fires people up. It doesn't leave them indifferent. You know, they don't go, eh. They're actually
exactly. That's exactly it. And William, who's on in the film strip as well, and I had an appointment that we set a while ago for this exact time, and we both contacted each other this morning and said, "Hey, can we put this back an hour? Because I want to go support Peter when he's
really
on."
appreciate it.
And that is what we have in our Google Plus community, is that kind of support that we need sometimes, because sometimes there are really bad periods, you know, where it just seems like everything's going backwards, and that's what we get from our community.
You're absolutely right, and you know, and we're sort of digressing a little bit, but actually it does impact on what we're talking about, because we do get a feel from the outside world, and when we step outside the constraints and the boundaries of G+, that things are going backwards, not just to the 20th century, but almost to the 19th in terms of the concept and the application of them. But I think there are two elements there. First of all, we are getting better at recognizing those patterns. Perhaps we're blind to them in the 20th century. Now we're not. So the moment they're being applied, even in a constricted and restrained environment, we can see them, and they begin to irk us. And the other thing, of course, is that let's not forget that the systems which apply those were made by us to serve us, and they no longer quite serve us the way that we expected them to. But any system that is set up is also self-sustaining and self-serving, in that it is there to preserve itself. I mean, these are the constructions we actually put in place. So if we're seeing that, it's a reaction to the disruption that is initiated by the things which we do. So it's a natural expectation, you know, and I think, again, this is a symptom of change coming. And as long as we don't stop pushing for that change and demanding it, eventually those systems will start responding in a different way. But yes, you're quite right. This is what we're seeing. And you know, the way we just connected here, exactly what you said. I mean, this is a technical show. Peter is talking about something highly technical. If we take it in a very sort of clearly clinically analytical way, it's a self-serving thing he does to sell a product for himself, right? He's not selling it for us. But at the same time, we've known him, we've seen the journey, we've all been part of it in some way, and we're all invested in this. You know, we feel this is fantastic and really wanted to succeed, and that's really disruptive. You know, it's bringing community values to a global stage, which, you know, if you take that globally, we're not really quite ready for, because we haven't really got any systems in place to deal with that. So, you know, your analysis of the pressures we face is spot on, and there's always a reason for that, and we should be aware of it. And again, it's semantically linked, because essentially, you know, both in the narrow sense of the words which we use and the concepts which define us and which we promote, but also in the relational connections which we make, which then become catalytic in their own right, and they begin another process of change every time. Kristen is very good at a lot of the times bringing out some really amazing hashtags, which absolutely make me laugh. But you know, they're creating ontologies in their own right. But Kristen, have you got any questions for Peter?
Gosh. Well, it just totally makes me think about the words that connect us. And Peter, having been such a completely successful community manager of some communities that all of us, I think, are in and adore, I think about that, and just think about about the impact about those words that connect us. And I was wondering if you could touch a bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when we do make a connection with words and we do understand and the context is correct, then we do make that connection. And you can do that with hashtags. We've done that so many times with hashtags, and you do them far more than I do. So so the beauty of it is, then we come into this, we're on the same page. You've seen it with Grizzle Grim now, David Wells. Onboarding, and that onboarding concept is when we all buy into it, and so communication becomes better. People aren't sort of in a place where they're not understanding things. And that's where I believe qualification is very important. Sometimes I might overqualify, but I'm better doing that than people getting the wrong idea. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. So I think that there's something about this joining of what we think about words, and this is what this does. It actually brings people together, and we've used it in brainstorming sessions recently, and it's really good. You just got this tablet, and people are tapping the words, and I'm tapping a word, and he's saying, "Oh, can you see this?" And then they're going over here and tapping this, and oh, wow, that's there too. And so that's that cherry picking thing, and so, but everyone, you know, is building into the same semantic, so they're sort of joining into the semantic. So it's the semantic that's the central part that we're all joining into, if you can understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
I just had to say kiwi picking.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Marinas has got a question here. She says, I talked in my original book about the search of tomorrow, and she's asking, have we got all the requirements now for the search of tomorrow? And is this an indication of that? You know, the stuff we're talking about, does it show that semantic technologies are maturing to the point that search itself becomes, you know, more predictive, more analytical, more responsive?
Definitely. Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I found it, one of the things that I found really interesting, and this was how I originally did it, when I saw words that connected, I'd Google them and see if there was a connection. In the end, I gave up because there was always a connection. And but it was fun at the time, you know, and it was really fun. I mean, like, you know, just really unusual connections that you just don't expect. And I just wanted people to have fun. I haven't gone out of the way to show these connections because I think the tool does it itself. And I don't want to spoil the fun for people, to be honest.
That's awesome. And again, it's not how disruptive it is. Suddenly, you know, if we think of essentially the kind of analytics that we can gain access to at an individual level now is easily comparable to what a group of highly trained analysts with really expensive tools would have had about 30, 40 years ago. And that shows that, you know, there's a huge trend in the democratization of access to data and information, but more than that, to the metadata, which gives us a clearer picture of the relationships.
Yeah, and I think the beauty is there's an overlap there as well, because you've got to have good descriptions. The descriptions must link. Semantics is just not, and you know this well and truly, it's not just about words, but words describe the things. They describe the images, they describe the videos, they describe the music. And so it's a far wider thing, but words are the connecting factor. To me, that's the glue between everything in that sense. And that's the way Google's seeing it now. So they're looking at images and putting them into words. And so we can't just put an image up there and say, Web Design Christchurch was a picture of a car. So, you know, so that, you see my point. And so we've got to be more careful in building a semantic because it's a wider spec than most people understand.
Okay, two difficult questions now. One is, let's say, you know, people start using this tool. Does this, in a way, begin to work against authenticity? Because suddenly being able to see a clearer picture of what you do and the impact and everything else, you begin to shape your message a little bit better. You begin to become a bit more clear in your intent. In a way, you're gaining a valuable tool which may allow you to game the way you appear on the web and the constructs you create. So
no, I know exactly what you're saying. And to me, I've tried to avoid that whole concept because I don't see it that way. I'm totally against gaming the system. I never did any black hat techniques. I've always relied on high quality backlinks, and you know, any check of my sites will prove that I have followed that procedure. And so I've always been white hat as far as people, and I don't really like labeling it like that. I find that that's sort of a bit too cut and dry, because you know, gaming the system to me is the antithesis of what I'm trying to achieve. To me, it's a creative tool. I did Perry Marshall did a thing. He does an analysis of what your strengths are, and what came out of that analysis for me was I'm both left-brained and right-brained. So but I'm more geared towards right brain. But I love analytics. I love figures, and just as much as I love words in that sense. But the creative element to me is the most important thing, and that's why I started doing it, was because of the creative element. And you know, I was a graphic artist before I became a web developer. So, and I was a music coordinator at a radio station before that. So I've had a wide range of experiences.
Brilliant.
That sort of all come together. Yeah.
Okay. Now the next question is also difficult, actually, and it comes from the stream again. And I think it was Clinton Vorster who asked it, and he said, "Does it work on images?"
Work on images. What do you mean by that?
I think he means will it help you analyze images and sort of?
Oh yes, analyze images. Yeah, it does. I mean, I look at images now and I try and see how it fits. It's like, how does this jigsaw piece fit? Is it the right semantic? Because, and that's like that playlist I did with River of Life. You've got Hindus, you've got all of these different ideas of what people think River of Life is. And just listening to it, you see the diversity, and that's the catchphrase for it, celebrate the diversity. And I believe that's a catchphrase for semantics in general, that we should be celebrating the diversity of the world and of people, and everyone's a piece of the puzzle, you know. No one should be left out, in my view. It's, they're all important, and we've all got our place to be. And it's finding that place, isn't it? It's finding a niche which is useful to other people, and you know, I think that's the most important thing.
It is.
Although you were incredibly valuable in this, because it just formulated at the same time I was doing these things. You were formulating semantic search, and it was just, you know, it was just serendipitous overall for me. Yeah.
I think we all sort of begin to feel. I mean, what you said about serendipity arising, you know, quite frequently, especially, you know, we get to see it within G+, because everybody sort of knows somebody who has some kind of incident like that to recount. But essentially, I mean, the fact is that we all respond more or less to the same pressures that we feel come from the trends and the data and what's happening in the world outside and around us, and we respond to those. So the fact that, you know, we're tackling the same things from a very similar position, or sometimes, you know, slightly different angle, is exactly a result of that. And I think inescapably, in the 21st century, technology, semantic technology in particular, is playing a critical role in our lives, whether we actually are aware of it or not. I mean, in the moment we have a smartphone in our pocket, we are subjected to that, whether, you know, we consciously know what the effect is or if we don't.
Yeah, hidden in plain sight, and that's what it's like, and that's like what this pattern was. It's hidden in plain sight. In ancient language, it was easier to see, and it's just got harder and harder to see as languages evolve, and so it sort of got hidden, and it's harder to see in English if you look at some of the older languages, even going back to the Egyptian and things like that. It was far easier to see what they were trying to do with this, and so that study was just superb in that sense. And you know, hidden in plain sight. Semantics is happening all over the place, as you say. It's in your video card. It's in your well, it'll be in your car. It's picking up information about you. All of that will be linked eventually. Everything will be linked to make your experience a better experience, and so that has to be good for us.
Yes, exactly. And the Internet of Things is just around the corner. I was in San Francisco just over a week ago, where, you know, Cisco are busy advertising everywhere about the Internet of Things coming along, and everybody's talking about the connections and the protocols that need to be put in place in order for devices to talk to each other. And, you know, in case that, you know, everybody doesn't know, what Peter is alluding to here is the fact that essentially the network around us won't be just a network of people connecting to people, but also devices connecting to devices, which maybe at some point a person will access to make a decision. So there's a long chain of events happening around us which we will be relying on, and we will not have immediate human control over. We'll have to rely on algorithms which are smart enough to actually make the right decision at some point. Yeah,
you know, I feel that it's got to the point where if you've got an extra person in the conversation, to me it's like, and that's why I saw it as an artificial intelligence. when I started seeing what other people were calling artificial intelligence, I thought, hold on, this is actually doing that. And so it's just like, if you've got the good things and the bad things and the middle things, that you can look at any situation, put it in front of the world leaders and say, okay, how are you going to put this together? You know, and one of the really interesting ones, I've got a set that I've created that's connected to relevancy, right? Now, it was just absolutely incredible, because you were talking about violence last week.
Yes.
And violence is actually the antithesis of relevancy, which is really quite intriguing. And it just shows the whole. Like I was reading the paper about what happened in Paris. I mean, it's on the help file. I've done a help file that's on the site. So, and it's available on YouTube as well. So I'll post that link so people can see it afterwards.
Yes, please. That'd be fascinating to see. And Kristen has brought up a comment which is actually really cool in terms of what you're saying. With light there is the dark, as well as the dawn and twilight. Okay, and Hard GA has actually put that up, which sounds very poetic, pretty much. Again, it touches upon many of the things which you just covered, Peter. And there's one comment from Pepper Oldsey on the stream, which says, "You mean someone can be too semantically rich so that Google thinks that they're non-authentic? What an interesting idea." And I think, again, this is exactly what you said, that basically it is the antithesis in many ways to what you're trying to do. Yeah. And there it is. Okay, there's Pepper who's brought it up.
Yes, yes. And, at times I was tempted just to put it out as a positive list. But it doesn't give the whole picture, and you've got to have the whole picture to make good decisions. Show up objections in industries and things like that, where people who are writing things can have a concept about, they know what the problem is in the industry. So, for instance, for flowers, when we did an original set for flowers, worry and worldwide came up, and then I did a search on it and looked at how it was a site where you could go to see what the most complaints about an industry are, and it appeared that is the most important trouble. They worry that they may not be bona fide, and all of those problems that go with it. So having negatives, you can find objections that you can write to. So in the past, as you well know, and there's some really good books out there. Biology is a good book in comparison. As a comparison to this, they paid millions of research probably in finding out how the brain was working and how it was being affected by certain things. You can circumvent this and pay only a small amount to find out these sort of factors that are sort of genuine problems in different industries. So negatives are far better than they appear.
Yes. Okay, so as we're heading towards, we've got about 7 minutes before we actually log off, and there's probably a lot more questions to answer, but let's begin with a hard one first. If you were to, if somebody was to come to you and say, "Hey Peter, I've got a great idea. I'm thinking of turning into a product. It has to do with semantic technologies." What would be one piece of advice you would give them that would actually help them?
Yes, it's an interesting question. I'd probably, and this is something I will do in the future, there's a certain way that I look at words, which, the people around me, because of the early stages, look at the same way. And that's not actually something that comes out from this product. I would probably get them to start looking at what is, the key, and I intend to write a book on this at the right time, but the key to actually finding out the key into the matrix. So that's the answer to that question. If they were a person that it could help.
It's surprisingly simple, right? But it's actually quite complex. Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. So my next question would be, okay, you launched the product. What next? Where are you going with this? I mean, what's the next step for you now? What is the next challenge?
Well, there's some really interesting things. I've had some really good conversations with Manny St. Vincent, and he has discussed the potential of getting this involved in games, and the potential of looking at semantic profiles and how semantic profiles can be used in these things to increase the enjoyment of of the experience. So in other words, characters are created according to your likes and dislikes based on your semantic profile. And that's a predictive semantic profile, by the way. It's not based on what has been presented through what they've done in the past or what someone's done in the past.
Huh.
So the other one is, and we've discussed this, I remember running through a few of your comments and sort of and working out, trying to work out what you were saying, trying to work out what your book was. So and it's tremendous. It was a reverse technology, and it was a hidden in plain sight. All of a sudden, I'd been sent to me by Mark. He says, "Oh, have a look at this. This is a reverse of it," and I hadn't even bothered to look at it. I was just so focused on this other stuff. And then I just opened it up one day and started running it through, and I found that it did the opposite. So it takes large amounts of data and creates a small ontology. So that's actually my next project. Yeah. So it's a way of
fascinating. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, and again, I mean, I must stress this basically because in just one little sentence, you've expressed and clarified the massive problem that Google is having with semantic search, where in order to create an entity or an ontology, the amount of data that it actually takes, and you have to verify that independently, is absolutely massive in a web that is not fixed. It's flowing all the time. Data is coming in, data is morphing, data is falling out of favor. So the task is quite humongous. So yeah, Peter, I think you just made a fantastically valuable point, which goes beyond just what you're talking about and goes across the entire semantic technologies sector.
Yeah,
and we have
yeah, and so then this is not the last idea, and of course you get ideas from the actual resource, and
yes.
I'll say that anybody who's creative can become more creative by using it. If you're creatively challenged, you'll appear more creative.
Yes. Okay. So, and what's your next challenge now as you're moving forward? Okay, you discussed where you're going with this. What's the next stage? And I mean, how difficult will it be to move to that stage? I mean, I presume that every time you iterate things, it is not an easy thing to do because of the nature of the technology and how it morphs.
Yeah, and I mean, like this latest advance that we've had, and I've had it in mind for about 2 or 3 months, and it's just a huge advance. It's just a subtlety that I saw in a pattern that I hadn't picked up, and it will actually make the resource even more creative. But and it's almost impossible to unravel now. I think anybody would have great difficulty.
Peter, how many hours does it take? How many man-hours does it take to make the change every time? I mean, on average, because obviously you can't specifically say at every stage because it's probably different. But on average, when you're looking at the next step, right, and you know from experience now that you're going to have, I don't know, X number of sleepless nights kind of thing.
No, it's hundreds of hours, and I mean, there's thousands of man-hours that have gone into this. It started in 2002, but the first of it was just journey and passion. See, it's my passion, so it's been easy, and you can say yes, and it was very nice of Zara to say about the perseverance, but the passion has sort of been an overriding factor, and I've just felt, it's just exciting to me, and all I've really wanted all along is for other people to actually benefit from it. I'm not really particularly, it's the idea that's more important to me than anything that's the side effect of it, put it that way. And so
that's
these
fantastic.
ideas.
What a sentence to finish on! I think it's absolutely brilliant. Okay, we're running out of time, and basically, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come here and make this available to the members of the Google Semantic Search Community. I'd like to thank Kristen and Zara for popping in. I'd like to thank everybody else in the stream who actually took time to watch and put some really valuable questions there. If you've been following this at all, apart from just today's Hangout on Air, the technologies here and the evolution, essentially is taking something which is ever more complicated on the technological front, but ever more human at the point of application. So essentially, we are finding the paradox of the more technology we use and the more technologies we use, the more humanized and humanizing the entire concept is becoming. Arguably, it's taking us to the next stage, which is the humanization of machines. Ergo, we get robotics and AI coming on the horizon. But these are just concepts right now. Robotics certainly at a very early stage. AI itself is still at an early stage, despite the huge advances we're actually seeing. We may not see any of it in our lifetimes, but Isn't it exciting to be part of the journey? And isn't it absolutely fascinating to be able to see this and talk about it like this across the world for the first time ever? Peter, thank you ever so much. Zara, Kristen, thank you both. This is David Amelon signing off for the Google Semantic Search Community. Take care.